Hello, my friends. Welcome to Origins. My name's Don Chapman. It's my privilege to be your host. You know, Origins is a forum where we take the evidence of science and we use it to validate the truth of creation. We have an incredible guest with us today. Dr. Stephen Austin is here. Dr. Austin, how good to have you with us. Dr. Austin is a field research geologist with a PhD from Penn State. He is the senior research scientist at the Institute for Creation Research.
It's good to be here.
And today we're going to talk about one of the most fascinating subjects in the Bible. I don't think you can talk about the words Sodom and Gomorrah without creating an interest in anybody that's ever heard anything about the Bible. And this is part 2 of his show. Will you just kind of bring us up to date on what we did in part 1?
Well, we looked at the biblical text and some of the historic evidence for the location of the cities of the plain. These 5 cities that
Sodom and Gomorrah were 2 of 5 cities that are described as the cities of the plain.
And Zoar is a city where Lot survived, and Admah and Zeboim were 2 other cities that were destroyed. And we looked at the evidence that they were located southeast of the Dead Sea.
And you made what seemed to me to be a very cogent proposal then from where Sodom and Gomorrah would be.
And we have sites to go look at.
Right.
And archaeological sites, dig sites, that can confirm the identity of these truly amazing biblical cities.
And you've been there doing that, haven't you?
That's been my one of my interests is the archaeology there in Jordan.
Well, today we're going to get our shovels out and dig with you, so if you'll go to the board, you can show us what you found when you found these sites that you believe are Sodom and Gomorrah.
Let's take the Sodom site first. It's on the Wadi Kerak, and it has a long history in the archaeological record, and it has a walled city sitting there. It's called Bab Edra. Bab Edra is this tell or mound. It's about 500 feet long, several hundred feet wide on the drainage called the Wadi Kerak, the stream drainage that goes through there. And there's a road next to it. Present-day road, and there's an ancient cemetery associated with this. This city had an enormous wall, and it's the right time. It's about Abraham's time. Early bronze, level 3 is the archaeological designation of the site, so it seems to fit the right time period. It was a city at the time of Abraham,
which is just about 2000 BC.
About 2000 BC. This exists.
For folks who don't know that, yeah.
Yeah.
All right.
Okay, well, if you look at Bab Edra, the site, from the west looking east, you see it's an elevated area, and you can see off to the side there is Wadi Kerak. Now, the wadi is down about 30 meters down below the present site. And then there's the cemetery on the south side, and then there's this border fault zone, enormous fault that runs right along the front side of the ancient city. And this is where huge displacements have occurred on this border fault. So the implication is that this site is located next to that fault, and of course we know that earthquakes and geologic disasters take out cities. Now the modern spring and the border fault's down here, and the modern spring is down in the wadi. So something has radically changed the site to transform how the water was at that site. Anyway, the city had to have a water supply, and I think I know what's happened. This site has been uplifted on the border fault, and it's been downcut on the wadi, and there's been some radical change to the geology of this site. So the ancient city of Sodom was sitting on top of that hill likely, and the ancient spring was up there, but today the modern spring is down 30 meters lower elevation in the wadi and the border fault. So the question is, what happened along that border fault to cause that change? Now, you can look at the site. You can see the western wall right here. The western wall is about 21 feet wide. Imagine a wall,
That's
21
a big wall,
feet.
yeah.
And it goes all around the whole city.
Which means it's a pretty substantial city.
It's a fortified city, substantially fortified.
Uh-huh.
And the excavators dug out the base of the wall to check exactly what the wall is founded on. And then the southwestern side of the site is the temple site. And and you can see the people up there for scale at the temple site. There I am right there at the temple site. Here's one of the buildings There's an area out here, evidently an altar or something, and there's a lot of burn everywhere.
Dr. Austin, is there any indication of to whom it was a temple?
No. We think it's some type of pagan deity or
but we don't
something like that.
identify
we
the
do
deity.
not know.
Okay.
No. But all around the site, we see evidence of burn. Here, I'm pointing at the charcoal in the soil. Here's the south wall. The south wall of the city is symmetrically collapsed. And we're talking about a wall that's 21 feet wide and several hundred feet long. And how did it collapse symmetrically? Now, if it was a battering ram from an army that was capturing the city or something, it would not be symmetrical. Could it have shaken and fallen in an earthquake? That's what it looks like happened.
Looks like an earthquake made the wall fall. Yeah.
It does look like that. It doesn't look like human activity or natural process just allowed the wall to fall like that or collapse. And here's the gate at the northeastern side of the city, the gate of Sodom, the only open gate when the city was destroyed. It was destroyed and not rebuilt, and in the gate I'm sitting there. Now the two angels came to Sodom, and Lot was sitting in the gate of Sodom. Escape to the mountains, lest you be destroyed. And Genesis 19.
So you could be very well sitting where Lot sat.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. And they say flee to the mountains. There's the mountains back there. There I am sitting in the gate. And so I had to have my picture taken there in the gate of Sodom. It just wanted to be. Oh, it's a walled city with a gate. Okay, everything matches the biblical text. North side of the city collapsed into the wadi, probably because of the uplift. About 30 meters of uplift. You can see down there the modern spring down there, but remember the ancient early bronze 3 spring in the city when the city was occupied was way up on the above the modern wadi. So something has radically changed the site. It looks like the gravity collapse here into the wadi is part of the thing, and there's the border fault back there. You see the likely culprit. Okay, the excavated cemetery south of the city is amazing. We're looking at what's a low-roofed burial chamber called a charnel house. Charnel House A22 was excavated, and the excavator described the stratigraphy of the deposit and said, it looks like somebody caused a fire on the roof of the burial chamber to cause it to fall. And it was not an internal fire within the house.
Fire fell on the roof.
It looks like fire fell on the roof, or the house was ignited from above.
Wow.
And why would anybody want to burn a cemetery? You know, so it looks like a widespread fire, not just a fire inside the city back there, but also in the cemetery outside the city. Dare
we say it sounds like brimstone?
It does. Yes. Okay, it sounds like a general fire over a wide area.
Yeah.
Okay, Sodom side's up there, Wadi Kerak. Wadi Nemira here in Gomorrah is the possible site. The Wadi Nemira is this big drainage that comes down and makes an alluvial fan as it goes into the southern basin of the Dead Sea. Southeast of the Dead Sea there is that site. I went to Wadi Nemira. Numira, N-U-M-E-I-R-A, is the Arabic way of saying it. Consonants N-M-R in Arabic. But in Hebrew it would be G-M-R, a guttural sound, not a nasal sound. So the nasal sound gives way to a G sound. So you could translate Nemira back into Hebrew and call it Gomorrah.
Yeah.
And so the city name may survive. And maybe the Arabic people want us to remember that it was Gomorrah, and they said it in as best they could in their language. Well, I made a geologic map of the site, and geologists love to do that. And I just show you I made a geologic map, and I'm not into talking about it. But only about half or 2/3 of the city remains, and it sits on a prominent location. And as I'm standing up there looking west over the site, you can see this here. And this is an amazing site. It's built on a hill. This hill is called a tell, and at the south eastern corner here is a tower. And there's another tower down here, and there's a wall that runs along the kind of southern side of the site. The wall on the northern side was collapsed into the wadi and is not there. So about 2/3 of the site is still there. And that's where Wadi Namira and Namira sits, and it sits really close to those faults. That's why, as a geologist, I had to go study that site, because it's just sitting there 100 yards from the major faults. Well, you can see the people at the southeastern corner of the tower. There's the southwestern and southern wall. That part of the site is what's there for study. I was able to look at this place, and we're looking out over east over the site, and you can see some of the excavation that's still open, and you can see the southeastern tower back there. The collapsed tower is probably the most geologically interesting part of the site. Then there's a collapsed house in here. In the collapsed house, a shaft was dug through the floor of the house to show the layering that exists at the site. And the collapsed house and the collapsed tower were the focus of my study. The collapsed tower is very interesting. Here you see the archaeologist at the wall, and you see the wall comes into the tower, and then the wall changes direction, so that southeastern tower there is the highest part of the site. But you can see the collapsed debris, and you can see the charcoal on the site. And I'll show you two images. First, I'll show you the charcoal and some of the collapsed debris sitting at the base of the tower. Then I'm going to show you what the excavator photographed and dug in that bigger image. Now, let's go to that, look at that. You can see the base of the tower, you can see all this burn that's overlying the debris of the collapsed tower. And so there's the tower back there, and here's the sand and pebbles and gravel that's sitting there with all of the charcoal at that site. And that's interesting, but what they excavated underneath that is more interesting. Here is the base of the tower. You can see the base of the tower right here, coming across here.
Yes.
Underneath and off to the side of the base of the tower were excavated two human skeletons. One over here.
Yeah.
Okay, and then one down here. Okay, and obvious trauma, head trauma. These people died in the collapse of the tower. And then the tower burned. Okay, there's burn all around here. See how black the ground is?
I guess the question begging to be asked is, if it's built out of solid rock, what's burning?
Yeah, everything is burned on the site.
Right. It's almost like something came from outside that was already on fire. Is that fair to say, or is that saying too much?
I thought about that, and so I started digging trenches outside the wall.
Okay.
And there's evidence of burn outside the city, which I think would confirm that hypothesis.
All right.
So, whatever the cause of this is, it's collapse and burn.
Okay.
Collapse and burn is everywhere. Now, I went to the house, and a shaft was dug through the house, and there I am sitting there. The archaeologist says, "Oh, don't you see the beaten earth floor?" And I say, "Oh, what?" And he says, "Look at this right here. Going along there, there's a beaten earth floor, and it's plaster that's been smashed and made into a floor." And I said, "Oh, okay." And then he had me look at the top, and up here are beams of burned timbers with smashed pottery underneath. And I thought about it. It's the collapsed house. The whole roof has collapsed onto the floor of the house and burned. And yeah, I'm looking at a collapsed and burned house. So there's the beaten earth floor, and I'll show you the right in there. Here you can see it. Here's the beaten earth floor going along right through here.
Uh-huh.
Okay, there's pottery shards that are imbricated sitting there, stacked there, and then you can see the burned timbers over the top of the pottery. And it's as if the roof collapsed on the house.
Something happened very drastic and suddenly, didn't it?
Yeah. The collapsed and burned roof resting on the floor. And there's the pre-cultural material and the post-cultural material. So it is very interesting to see what we've seen at that site. So the geology of Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom was built on ancient lake beds. Gomorrah was built on an active alluvial fan. Both sites were abruptly destroyed in the early Bronze III by collapse and ignition. Both sites are adjacent to enormous border fault that created the Dead Sea Rift Zone. Both sites display vertical displacements associated with those faults of tens of meters. Okay, and then both sites have severe mass wasting and erosion. So this is amazing to think about. Tar seeps are associated with the border fault. And I want to talk to you more about that in a little bit. But this has all the makings of a natural disaster of a colossal scale. Border fault, tar seeps, collapse and burn. The destruction event is described in Genesis 19. Here's the text. It says, "Then the Lord rained on Sodom and upon Gomorrah brimstone and fire from the Lord out of heaven. And he overthrew those cities and all the plain and all the inhabitants of the cities." And then you can imagine what it looked like from Abraham's viewpoint. He's over there at Mamre, which is modern Hebron in Israel, and he's looking down there toward the southeastern part of the Dead Sea, 30 miles away. He sees Sodom and Gomorrah, Zoar, Admah, and Zeboim, those 5 cities, and there's smoke all over the place. And so maybe a 25-degree angle of view, something like that. You know, he's got a little peripheral vision, but when you're looking there, you see smoke, okay? And he's looking southeast, more than 30 miles distance. He sees smoke like a forced air furnace rising over the cities of the plain, across maybe a 30-degree angle of view.
Now, just a reminder from the Scripture that God had come and spoke with Abraham before this happened. Yes. God warned him this was going to happen. So he's literally looking out, seeing the fulfillment of a prophecy that God had told him, and now he's saying God's doing what he told me he was going to do.
And I imagine he's wondering what happened to Lot.
I'll bet he is.
And what happened to Lot? He survived in the middle of the catastrophe in Zoar.
He made out better than his wife did, didn't he?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we've got to take a break. Don't you go away. We want to look at the implications of this, and you come right back. We'll be right back with you.
Today's guest on Origins, Dr. Steve Austin, is a field research geologist with his PhD in sedimentary geology. He is senior research scientist with the Institute for Creation Research. He has been involved in geologic exploration for 40 years on 6 of the 7 continents of the world. Steve has also done extensive field research at the Grand Canyon and Mount St. Helens. He is the author of several books, videos, and more than 30 technical geology papers. One of his books, Footprints in the Ash, deals with the 1980 eruption of Mount St. Helens. Dr. Austin can be reached at Institute for Creation Research, 1806 Royal Lane, Dallas, Texas, 75229.
All right, we're back with Dr. Stephen Austin, and we're in Sodom and Gomorrah, and we've seen his archaeological evidence of burn all over where he believes those 2 cities were. And we finished by talking about Abraham standing up on the mountain and looking down 30 miles, and as far as he could see, it's burning. I guess my question is, what's burning? Everything's built out of rock. What's he see burning, sir?
Well, at the edge of the Dead Sea, you can see the salt that encrusts the Dead Sea. And I was down there looking at the shore of the Dead Sea, and in this one place, I found the salt broken away, and what do I see seeping out of the ground? I see tar seeping out.
Wow.
And this fault, the fault zone, has tar in it, okay? And if it has tar, it could have gas. It could have all kinds of petroleum in it. And so this oozing tar from the rock along the border fault could be some of the material that burned.
That's fascinating.
And something to think about. And could it be erupted from the fault? For example, the Owens Valley earthquake of March 26, 1872, immediately following the Great Shock, men whose veracity is beyond question saw sheets of flame on the rocky sides of the Inyo Mountains just a few miles distant. These flames, observed in several places, waved to and fro apparently clear the ground like vast torches, they continued for only a few minutes. And so during earthquakes, you can have fire. And fire is caused probably by natural gas bursting out of the fault and other types of flammable material. So earthquake fires are well documented. And earthquake lightning is well documented. This is a Chilean volcano that erupted in May of 2008. And you can see as the volcano is erupting, as the material's coming out, lightning all around. Lightning is one of the causes, one of the results of some of these things. During some earthquakes, competent observers have described flaming phenomena, scorched trees, explosive sounds, erupting sand and mud, floating tar, sulfurous smells, even bubbling lakes. And so earthquakes create these unusual situations. These observations demonstrate that gases and liquids erupted along faults during earthquakes are frequently combustible.
Makes sense.
So we've got a flammable source associated with the faults at these sites. Now add to that piezoelectricity. If I take a quartz crystal, okay, and hit it with a hammer, I can generate a voltage across it. It's a pressure electric phenomena associated with rocks and crystals. A pressure applied to a quartz crystal produces a measurable voltage. Any rock that is hit can generate voltage. The piezoelectric phenomena is associated with a phonograph needle. A microphone vibrates a crystal, which creates a voltage. And a digital wristwatch is in reverse. We put a voltage on a crystal and it causes a vibration we use to tell time. The unfamiliar example of piezoelectricity is earthquake lights. When earthquakes occur, they create electricity, and electricity can cause very unusual atmospheric effects and even ignite flammable substances. Earthquake lights, normal lightning, fireballs, sky flashes, aurora-like beams, even St. Elmo's fire of wide extent have been observed associated with earthquakes and volcanic eruptions. These strange lights have been created by the piezoelectric effect from stress applied to rock during earthquakes. So everything is there to make an unusual fire. One other thing I might talk about is the earthquakes that we have recorded underneath the Dead Sea. There are earthquake shadow zones beneath the Dead Sea. The earthquakes are not uniformly spaced. There are places where earthquakes don't seem to occur. And it's been argued geologically that there is a large zone of plastic material that doesn't behave brittly. And so we're thinking that there's hot, ductile, high-density magma at depth underneath the Dead Sea. So the fault may have associated with it magma, molten rock down there 10 kilometers down.
Coming up.
Look at that. And the biggest magma body might sit underneath the southern Dead Sea.
Wow. You know, I've heard Billy Graham say that if God doesn't judge America, he's going to have to apologize to Sodom and Gomorrah. I don't think God apologizes, because when God judges sin, he judges sin. He's not a respecter of persons. Isn't that right?
Yes. There's a story here that goes beyond just the history and the archaeology and the geology. There's important lessons to be learned here, aren't there?
There are life lessons for us as individuals and for a nation as well. You know, Genesis isn't a myth. Genesis is a book where when we really dig down and look at what it says precisely and apply it to geography and apply it to history, apply it to archaeology, we find the truth of God's Word. And the truth in this case is a somber truth. It's a truth that teaches us that God judges sin and that he judges nations, and that when we don't walk in God's way, we could be confronted with God's wrath. I hope you'll think about that a lot. And above all, I hope you'll remember this. It's God's view that he created you. That should be your worldview too. Think about this, pray about this, my friend, and I hope to see you again soon here at Origins. Until then, God bless you, my friend.
thank you for watching this edition of Origins. If you'd like a copy of the PowerPoint information presented today, you can download a PDF file of program number 1006 from our website at www.originstv.org. Or for a DVD of this series, send a $12 donation to cover shipping and handling and write to Origins, program number 1006, Cornerstone Television, Wall, Pennsylvania 15148.
Origins is made possible by the faithful prayers and the financial support of you, our Cornerstone Television family.